How's everybody? Can you hear me? You're going to turn it up? Can you hear me now? Okay. How's everybody? Good. Okay. So I actually would like to do this as much as a kind of organizing session and open it up. I understand I should say something, so I will say something. But the issue that we're trying to have a conversation about is not an issue that the country has really ever been mature enough to have a conversation about. And so one of the questions that we are raising is, can the country have a conversation about all the children in the country being children of the country, and the country really taking responsibility for the quality public school education of all the children? So there is a difference between the idea of treatment as an equal and equal treatment in terms of ways in which the Constitution and people who think about the Constitution think about those issues. So treatment as an equal had to do with things like standing in separate lines and being in a subordinate position. And we all know a lot of examples of that. Equal treatment has to do with, well, if something's being handed out, everybody gets an equal share of what's being handed out. So on the educational side, if the country is actually saying that we should have public education, equal treatment asks, is every child getting an equal share of what is available for public education? So the issue kind of came up this afternoon. We were having some conversations, and let me digress. Cortland Cox is here, and Cortland, SNCC had its 50th anniversary last spring, and Cortland, after the anniversary, took on the responsibility of organizing some SNCC people. So that's a big job, right? So, and as part of that, he invited the Algebra Project and the Young People's Project to come take a look at your city and to see whether or not we could actually do some of what we're talking about tonight here in D.C. So we've been here since the past election, trying to get some handle on that question. And today we had a discussion with one of the people who handles that question from the DCPS. And so I raised at one point in the discussion that, well, look, when SNCC was in Mississippi doing voter registration, we weren't thinking about getting a few elite voters, right? Or we weren't thinking about, well, how do we make sure that so that we get the cream of the voting crop. I mean, if you understand the 1957 Civil Rights Act, so remember back 1950, how many people were here in 1957? Okay, so some of us were here. So in 1957, Eisenhower was president, and Lyndon Baines Johnson was the majority leader of the Senate. And the first civil rights bill since Reconstruction was passed. Jackie Robinson was everybody's star, and also a Republican. And he fired off a telegram to the president, and he said, this is a terrible bill. It's a toothless bill. Please veto it. Well, he didn't veto it. Strom Thurmond tried, right? I think maybe Thurmond understood that there was something to this bill that was deeper than what met the eye, because he filibustered that bill for 24 hours by himself and some minutes. But when he was finished, the Senate passed the bill. Now, that bill was kind of the idea of, let's look for some elite voters. In other words, it was a bill that said the professors at Tuskegee who qualify to vote under anybody's standard should be allowed to vote. So the bill didn't have SNCC in mind. And that was the country's problem, because when the sit-in movement emerged and SNCC emerged out of the sit-in movement, they had a very different take on that bill. And in that bill, thinking about these Tuskegee professors, they had some language there which said, well, anybody who interferes with a person trying to register to vote, the state can't do that, and anybody who's trying to help somebody register to vote, the state can't lock that person up. So in Mississippi then, what actually happened was that Mississippi wanted to lock SNCC up, but because of that bill, the feds could come and turn the jailhouse key and get SNCC out, right? And so we actually were able to organize. And you have to appreciate that the movement came into into Mississippi through the Freedom Rides. But the Freedom Rides and the idea of direct demonstration couldn't take hold. That is, in order for it to take hold, people would have had to do the Nelson Mandela and stay in jail for longer periods of time than they were willing to stay in jail. So that part of the movement didn't take hold. And also remember that Mississippi, as it has done many, many times in the nation's history, said, you all come and the buck stops here. So they could have let the Freedom Riders through. They could have said, okay, get off the bus, come in here, we close the restaurant, and then we put you back on the bus, and you all take your way on down to New Orleans. But Mississippi didn't want to do that. Mississippi said, the buck stops here. If you come in here, we're going to put you away. And so they piled up all those Freedom Riders in Parchman. And then when they came out, they couldn't quite get direct action off the ground because there was no cover for it. So the cover for the work we did around voter registration was this little piece of legislation that was designed for Tuskegee professors, but then in the hands of SNCC became a real tool for illiterate sharecroppers.